Uh, Hi, welcome back to the podcast, boys. I'm one of your hosts, Connor Nielsen. Joining me as always on his very own channel, it's the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
I'm doing very good. You aren't going to believe this, but here in a second, I'm going to do the plot synopsis, and I was going to do that exact same bit. I was going to just growl and like lumber through the plot synopsis. For anyone who didn't watch our podcast where we talked about Halloween 3, we are talking about the 2020 movie Capone. This was my choice. I chose this. I had never seen this before. Connor, had you seen this before I chose it?
Yes.
Yes, I did. I watched it a year ago. Now I have to make this an annual tradition. I watched it a year ago when I went to Los Angeles to visit my buddy Rasco. We were just hanging out one night, and he's like, let's watch Capone. And I said, okay. And then we did. And now for this podcast, I could have just not watched it again, but I did. I want to make that clear.
Okay.
That's my loyalty to you as a friend and to this podcast. I watched it again. But Comics Kid,
Why don't you tell us the premise of Capone?
Okay, so this is set in the last years of the life of American mobster Al Capone. At the beginning of the movie, we have a title card that says he was put in prison for like 10 years, and then the American government deemed that he was not a danger to anyone, so he was released, and this is his last years on Earth. And this is directed by Josh Trank, famous or infamous. He did Chronicle, and then he did Fan Forstick, and then he did this. And I'm not sure if he's actually done anything else. And then this is starring Tom Hardy as Al Capone, Linda Cardellini from The Founder as his wife, Matt Dillon from Wayward Pines as his friend Johnny. And then we have Kyle MacLachlan, who is our Twin Peaks connection. He is a doctor who comes to the Capone house. And the plot is Al Capone is crazy or is losing his mind. And then you have to decide what is and is not happening in his head and what is and is not real. And you get to see his family kind of try to keep things together as he's just losing it. And then his friends are there, and it's not really a mobster movie. When I chose this, I was thinking of Gotti, and Gotti is not a well-made movie, but whatever you say about it, it is a mobster movie. It is a rise and fall of John Gotti story where he's working in the American Mafia. This is not really a mobster movie because all the mob activity has already happened in the distant past. And this is just a man who is losing his touch with reality and his family's reaction to that. Now, whether this is meant to be a comedy movie or not, I can't tell you that. I really don't know. Connor, a couple weeks ago, you and I were talking off camera, and I asked you if you thought that Tom Hardy was a good actor, and you said yes. I'm still not really sure where I fall on that, because I think that his performance as Bane is funny, and I was telling you that for The Dark Knight, like that was like one of the most financially successful movies at that time, like. I want to say it was, I mean, not counting something like Titanic, it was one of the most financially successful movies, period. And as far as superhero movies go, I blame The Dark Knight for propelling society into being in this superhero glut that we're in right now. I think that it was The Dark Knight that convinced actors, like, there are people who 15 years ago never would have been in a superhero movie to save their life. And then when they saw that The Dark Knight made like $1 bazillion, they were like, oh yeah, I'd love to be in, Ant-Man 15 or whatever. And so I think with The Dark Knight Rises, everyone was like waiting with bated breath to watch The Dark Knight Rises. And then they had to wait 4 years because in between, Nolan also did Inception. And so I think that's right. Dark Knight, Inception, Dark Knight Rises. And then the movie comes out, and I think a lot of people had a visceral reaction to Bane. And a lot of people were saying you couldn't understand what he said. I don't know if I would go so far as to say you couldn't understand him, but I do think that his performance is funny, and I don't necessarily want funny. I wanted menacing and terrifying from the villain of this trilogy that's been building up for, at that time, 8 years. And I think Tom Hardy, you had said, like, sometimes directors just kind of let him go in a direction. They won't rein him in. And I think I agree with that. I think, like, in Venom, he's kind of just hamming it up. I think in this movie, he is kind of... I think his acting is good, but I think that some of his vocal choices, I think Josh Trank should have gone to him and said, hey, why don't we try this thing instead? And part of that is Tom Hardy, and I know I've been talking for a while, but part of that is Tom Hardy is a British man playing an Italian American, and so he's already going to have to do a voice if he wants to sound like Al Capone. But on top of that, he's also talking in lobster, like Connor was at the beginning of this podcast, where he's like, It legitimately sounds like Burgess Meredith's Penguin performance from the 60s Batman. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Like I've said, I don't know if this movie is a comedy. Comparing this to the other Josh Trank movies I've seen, I think this is my favorite. But the bar was already set incredibly low. I know everyone else really loves Chronicle. I did not care for Chronicle. So, Connor, what did you think of this movie?
Okay. I don't think this movie works. I think at its core, there's a kernel of a good idea for a movie here. Mm-hmm. I guess I shouldn't even really say there's a kernel of a good idea for a short film here. And I feel like, honestly, there's like a 12-minute stretch almost directly in the middle of the movie that feels like it was the only reason Josh Trank made this movie. It feels like the sort of general concept of the movie about a person as they're losing their mind, kind of, and as they're dying, they're confronting the history of their legacy and whatnot, sort of as they're going, and it's sort of blurring with their current reality, and they're being haunted by their past. Like, there's like a segment halfway through the movie that's not, I don't know, I kind of liked it the first time I watched it, and then when I was watching it now, it didn't hit me nearly as hard. But as a short film idea, it's not that bad. There's some interesting creative choices, but I think that when you have it just as its own movie, it just feels like a collection of scenes that happen. And every scene sort of perpetuates the same idea, but you don't want to perpetuate the same idea when you're making a movie. You want with each scene to build on the ideas. And this doesn't really build, and it does sort of feel like a collection of not only scenes that are just sort of exist, but it also feels like a collection of, I feel like, really sort of amateur hour writing concepts. Oh, it's Al Capone. He's living in his big house, but as he's losing his mind, the house is, they're in financial trouble. So the art is coming off the walls, and the statues are leaving where they are, and the house is becoming empty. Do you get it? It's like, oh my word, like, for real? Like, a professional, like, filmmaker made, like, I don't know, that feels like what you do in, like, your first year of film school, when you're like, you don't really have any stories to tell, but you need to, like, make something for class, and you need to, like, demonstrate, like, oh, the house is like him. Oh. And also, like, as far as movies about, like, I'm amazed you said this was your favorite Josh Trank movie, because this is exactly what you generally say you hate, which is like, what's real? What's a dream? What's even happening? And I know I've kind of gone up to bat for those kinds of movies in the past. I don't go up to bat for it when it comes to this movie, because I don't care, and the movie does not play fair at all. Matt Dillon's characters, this is a spoiler podcast, and also nobody cares, just does not exist. Like, he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But his introduction completely cheats.
Yes, there's several scenes like that.
Yes. Wait, does his son calling him even exist?
Well, Linda Cardellini answers the phone.
Yeah.
And so and it's like that with all these scenes. Like, whenever Capone is talking to somebody, like, I think he's talking to, I don't remember, at one point he says, I had $10 million. Or no, he's, sorry, I had $10 million. And then Matt Dillon says, what? And he says, I hid $10 million. And so, and then we cut to a car where the federal agents are in the car listening in on this conversation. Now, Capone is not there physically where they are. So it's not like Capone is imagining that they are there. Let me go back because
Okay.
Someone
just sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Look, I'm just gonna say before I wrap up, like there are so many parts of this movie where it's like, okay, if Matt Dillon does not exist, did Al Capone dress himself up in drag, get in a car, and drive himself to the boat? Okay, how did
The scene, he's dressed up like Poison Ivy from Batman and Robin when she's at the airport.
Oh yeah, you need to have a side by side of that. That is, yes, you're absolutely right.
Go ahead.
But okay, so okay, if he's not there, is all of it just a fantasy? Is him getting on the boat a fantasy? Because him talking to Matt Dillon is a fantasy. So is him even getting to the boat and being on the water? Like, how did he do that? I guess he just, it's all a fantasy. Who cares? And I feel like half of the movie is that. And I don't know, like that's just sort of like one of those things where it doesn't feel like this sort of like, okay, it is motivated by something in the screenplay. I was going to say it does, but it doesn't feel like him losing his mind is really trying to say anything about the person. It's just like, well, he has syphilis and he lost his mind and he craps the bed and he pees himself and it's kind of gross and off-putting. But it's like I don't understand what Josh Trank's aim or ambition even is. Like, I'm so confused by what he's trying to say with any of this. He edited the movie, he wrote and directed the movie. I don't know. It's a very like dry movie that this is all a podcast that spins out of Twin Peaks and all, but like I could definitely feel like a David Lynch influence, but like even down to the sound design, I can feel a David Lynch influence, but like I just don't understand what he is bringing to this or what he's even trying to say. Sorry, I kind of went on a little bit long there too.
No, that's okay. You're right that normally when you have a movie where it's like, ooh, what's real and what's not, like I'm not a big fan of that. I think I should say, number one, when I say this is my favorite Josh Trank movie, it's not like I'm putting this in my top 50 movies of all time or anything. I'm comparing this to Chronicle and Fanforstic. I really disliked both of those movies. Now, it has been a long time since I've seen Chronicle, maybe since it was in theater. That was a situation where everyone I talked to acted like that was the best movie they had ever seen, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand their reaction to it, and I understood the movie just fine, but I didn't really get the love for that movie. Josh, even when you take away the executive meddling that happened on Fanforstic, I feel like Josh Trank's vision for those characters was just wrong, where he said he wanted to do a David Cronenberg body horror for them, and I feel like no, like I think for the Fantastic Four, it should be like Star Trek original series plus The Incredibles. And if your approach is anything other than that, if you say I want to do something really dark and grim and gritty, then you should be launched into outer space before you can touch the Fantastic Four. And so like that's why like I had just a really miserable response to both of those movies. So going into this, I was expecting it to be as nonsensical as Gotti. And I think I understood this more than I understood Gotti. Like with Gotti, you and I both had like, wait, where does this scene take place? And then like, oh, wait, we've got two different framing devices. And his 40-year-old son is playing 16 here. and then like, you know, that movie was just laughable. And like, I enjoyed watching it because it was so like weird in its entertainment value. But like with this movie, it wasn't quite that it wasn't that mind-numbingly bizarre. And so you're not wrong. A lot of what you're saying, I agree with, especially like the parts where so to get in what you were saying, Matt Dillon plays Al Capone's friend and possibly his mentor. There's a real-life mobster named Johnny Drione or something like that. I don't remember. I'm not sure if Matt Dillon is playing that character, because in real life, that mobster died of a heart attack while getting a haircut or waiting to get a haircut. And in this movie, we are told that Johnny got stabbed in the neck while his face was duct taped or something. So anyway, Matt Dillon is having sex with some woman somewhere outside of the state of Florida. He gets a phone call from somebody. Maybe it's Linda Cardellini or maybe it's Kyle MacLachlan. I don't know. And then he says, oh, okay. And then he hangs up and he says to his woman, he says, I'm going to Florida. And then we cut to him talking to Al Capone out on the balcony. And then Capone says, let's go fishing. And so then there's the scene where they're in the car and Al Capone is wearing like the old woman sitting on her porch drinking lemonade, watching the pool boy clean the pool hat and the sunglasses like that. I will definitely have to put a screenshot up. I cannot describe that, but then they're in a boat, they're fishing, and then Al Capone tells them that I hid $10 million, and then or he says that at some point, and then he's trying to catch a fish, and then a gator gets the fish, so then he gets a gun out and shoots the gator, and then later Al Capone is on his balcony again talking with Matt Dillon, and then Linda Cardellini comes out, and Al Capone says, "Can you get a drink for my friend here?" And we cut, and there's nobody in the chair. And so, like you said, is there any scene in this movie where Matt Dillon is really there? And I guess it's up to interpretation. And you're right. I normally hate this. I don't know if this is me actually enjoying this shtick, or if it's just that I like this better than the previous two train wrecks that Josh Trank was at the head of. But normally you're right. Like, if it's a movie where you can say it can be about anything, then my response to that would be, then it's about nothing, if you can't tell me what it actually is about. And with this movie, I don't know what it's about. But I guess because I wasn't sure what to expect, I thought, okay, it's a mobster movie. Tom Hardy looks like he's playing a cartoon who belongs in a different movie altogether. Mm-hmm. And it's directed by the guy who directed some of my least favorite movies of all time. Like, let's see what happens. And then it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. I think that's why I had the not completely negative reaction that I did. But I agree with a lot of what you said, that and I will say I didn't even pick up on the very not subtle, the house is starting to lose stuff just like he's starting to lose his mind. I didn't even pick up on that. That's how, sometimes when it comes to theme, I don't pay attention to theme at all. And so it takes someone saying, this is blatantly obvious, for me to be like, oh yeah, it is. I get it now.
Well, I mean, to be in your defense, there is so much weird stuff to just be like, oh, they did a dramatic reveal of him crapping the bed. And it's one of the funniest. I very rarely have I laughed harder in the year of 2020. Not a whole lot of movies come out. I think that is the biggest laugh a movie gave me was that. It is treated so dramatically, and it's. I thought it was hilarious, but it's willing to go to all of these places and it's trying so hard to be off-putting and strange, and Tom Hardy's performance is so bizarre, and so while you're watching, you're like, what is happening? But yeah, I don't know. There's a weird boringness about it, though, that I kind of hesitate to really. That's what kind of holds it back for me as far as enjoying the weirdness of it. I don't know. There's so many weird things in it. The title card and the opening credits don't come until 12 minutes into it. Mm-hmm. And that, clearly a director with free reign did this. You know what I mean? That's something where I pick up on those things, because I've seen enough movies where there's 30 opening company logos and you recognize none of them. Uh-huh. And this is one of those, and you're in for a bad movie when you get one of those. And this is right in line with those, where it's boring, it's not good. You don't know how it got all the financing. Maybe it's because all of these studios need something on the resume. Maybe they're trying to do a tax write-off. Who knows? They see Tom Hardy's name attached to it and they're like, oh, okay, sure, why not? That's not. I will say there's one company attached to this that I recognized, Braun Productions. They've done stuff that's respectable in the past, but I don't know what was that one called? Bellevue Content. Somebody actually named their company that. I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm kind of rambling and I'm kind of in search for something to talk about here. But I guess if I want to talk about anything, I do want to like go up to bat for Tom Hardy. This is a performance that is very memeable. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. When I watch this, I think, what is he doing? It's weird. He's committing to it, but I think beneath the very showy, bold choices, I will call them, that he is doing, there are very subtle, masterful acting choices he makes throughout. But they're sort of beneath this layer of like caricature that is just so noticeable. And I think there are less noticeable qualities about his performance that I do find that do remind me why I appreciate him so much as an actor.
Yeah, I am still on the fence about him being a bad actor. And if he was really bad, I wouldn't be on the fence. I would just say he's a bad actor. But I think, like you said, the memeable stuff is getting in the way of me noticing any subtlety. And I think if he had just done like a normal voice here, then I think we could have really picked up on some of the subtlety of like, here's a guy who was at the top of his game. Like whoever the guy is, who his friend, and at one point he's like, hey, can you put down that picture of the money bag that you're drawing so I can talk to you? And he says, you used to be all up here. And he like points at his head. He's like, I used to respect that about you. And it would have been great if we could have seen like, this is a guy who used to be a criminal mastermind. And now he's like, he doesn't even know what day of the week it is. He doesn't know what he had for lunch. Like it'd be great if we could really dive into that and pick up on that. But unfortunately, I'm just noticing Tom Hardy making a lot of grunting and growling noises in the movie. Like, it's hard for me to pick up on the subtleties. And I'm sure he is doing stuff. It's just hard for me to pick up on it.
Yeah, and I must admit, it does take me a little bit of squinting to see that. And maybe I'm only looking for it because I'm, I don't know. I am trying to look for good qualities in this movie. I don't think the movie, though, was like a total loss, though. Like, I think Gotti is a much worse movie than this, but that also makes it a much better movie than this.
Mm-hmm.
Where
or
that
entertaining,
movie,
anyway.
Yes, it's much more entertaining because, I mean, that's just a movie that's like incompetently directed, and it's just trying to be Goodfellas, and it's hilarious. Where there's a sequence in Goodfellas where Robert De Niro's character is cleaning shop. He's paranoid. And he did this big heist, and he's worried that like someone's going to spill the beans. So there's this whole montage set to the back half of Layla's Derek and the Dominoes of all of these people just getting killed. And it's like, wow, this guy's reach is long, basically. Mm-hmm. And then they try doing that exact same thing in Gotti, and they only have like
2 people.
It's like 2 people, and it's so pathetic. It's hilarious. This movie, it's like, it's not a bad looking movie. Like the colors are actually kind of interesting where it looks muted a little bit, but there are, I think, vibrant colors even in that mutedness. The location of Florida is kind of interesting. The kind of the blanket, like white walls of Tom Hardy's house, or at least like outside, are interesting. Like, I don't know, like there's some interesting stuff here from a production angle. It's not a bad looking movie. It's well cast. I think nobody's really giving a bad performance. There's a bunch of people here giving solid work, and one person doing whatever he can because he can get away with it. And it's like, if it weren't for Tom Hardy, though, this movie would be just like a complete snooze fest and completely forgettable. And so that's why it's like, well, you know what? Say what you will about Tom Hardy, but I'm going to remember this performance. Like, mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I do impressions of it all the time when I'll be at like, get-togethers and parties and stuff, and people will be like, Connor, do Tom Hardy, and I'll just be like or something like that. And like, I mean, and people laugh, like, but like it's I remember it. You know what I mean? And like, I thought my caricature of Tom Hardy's performance in this movie was maybe a little too caricaturized. And in watching the movie, I discovered it's actually not really the case. It's just that I needed to use more of my lower register. So instead of going, it should be more like, it should be more like that. So I think it was necessary for a rewatch, I'll just say. I don't know. I don't even really know what point I was arriving at. I think the movie is not without artistic merit. I just think it just displays that Josh Trank is not a good filmmaker. I wouldn't call him bad. Like, he's competent, but and it's not like he's divorced. It's not that he's without ideas. It's just that now that I've seen 3 of his movies, I know he, does not consider Fantastic one of his movies or whatever. But like, I don't know what makes a Josh Trank movie a Josh Trank movie. And
yeah,
like, it's sort of like I think someone like Gareth Edwards is a better version of Josh Trank. Gareth Edwards made the 2014 Godzilla movie, and he made Rogue One, and he made a movie called Monsters. Now, I think Gareth Edwards is a talented, competent filmmaker, and he does his thing very well. The problem is he does one thing, and that's it. And so it's, if you've seen one Gareth Edwards film, you've kind of seen every Gareth Edwards film. And he's only made 3 movies and nothing else. And the last movie he made came out in 2016. It's been a minute. And this is like Josh Trank within 10 years, like Gareth Edwards, he's made 3 movies. And it's like, okay, I guess I can identify, some kind of broad tone that connects the 3 movies. But as far as like what his artistic fixations are, what he wants to say, like whatever like is like kind of the soul of the artist, I don't know what he's all about. And I feel like when you're a young filmmaker, you get a little bit more leniency. Whereas like your first 3 movies, you can really show people what you're all about. And I don't know, like I don't know what Josh Trank's creative identity is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because with the 3 he's done, they're all bad in different ways. And like you said, we can blame part of Fantastic on the studio coming in and wanting to make a different movie than what Trank wanted to make. I still feel like Trank wanting to make the movie he wanted to make was a bad idea. But you're right. Like with those 3 movies, I still feel like Chronicle is not very well executed. So like, and maybe this would be helped if he did more movies. I think also after Fantastic, he kind of went into semi-retirement for a while to like keep his cool, and like because he reacted very poorly on set to Fantastic, and so like I think he wanted to like gather his composure before he went and made another movie. And with this, I would say the reason he made this movie in particular, instead of making like, I don't know, doing the Francis Villeneuve or Denis Villeneuve Dune, instead of doing something like that, like he wanted to make something smaller and air quotes more personal, because it's something that he felt like he could probably do. After the failure of the Fantastic Four movie, I think he realized, I can't do the big studio stuff because they're going to want to come in and make it theirs, and I want to make it mine. And so at least with this movie, it has a bunch of studios you've never heard of before, because they're not going to try and tell Josh Trank how to do his job. And so I was reading, apparently in an interview, he said that this felt like his first movie because, like you said, Fantastic didn't really feel like his movie. And I don't know if he feels any love or hate toward Chronicle, but like,
well, to be fair, Chronicle's a found footage movie. So maybe like he feels like he's not really making a movie so much as trying to, make something that doesn't really feel like a movie.
That could be. And to your point about how this would have made a good short film, I think that's very telling, because he got his start making these little short films. He made like was it him or was it Gareth Edwards who did the movie about like it's some people at a party and then they bust out a lightsaber and it's like a found footage type thing?
I think that's Trank, I think.
Okay. And so like that's where he got his start. And admittedly, probably most filmmakers did, but maybe that's just where he's more comfortable. Maybe he, I know we don't live in an era where you see like a little short film before the main attraction, but maybe he would be better off if he was doing like an anthology TV series for Hulu or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like where he's doing these little things and he can do a lot with a little, instead of trying to do a big, this is only not even a 2-hour movie. And instead of him trying to do that, if he tried to do something even smaller in scope, maybe that'd work better.
Possibly, yeah. And I think this is an attempt to go smaller in scale, like you had previously said. I'll agree with you there. I like Chronicle. At least I remember liking Chronicle. I thought it was really cool. But that was also like, when I think about that movie, and now that I've seen more films written by Max Landis, that feels like such a Max Landis screenplay, or like such a Max Landis story. It kind of hits all of those conventional Max Landis beats. But with this, like, there's even still some element of studio meddling, I feel, in this movie. So I know a little bit about the history of this movie. Before it was called Capone, it was originally going to go by another title.
The Fonz?
It was no, it was going to go by Fonzo.
Oh, okay.
That was the title. It was going to be called Fonzo. And it's just kind of funny when you're watching this movie and Linda Cardellini is talking to somebody. She sets Al Capone down for bed, and then she's saying goodbye to like one of the people who used to work for him, and he says, "Hey, if there's anything you or Al need, just let me know." And then she says, "We don't use that name here." And that feels like the movie making a statement about what it is. This is not a story about Al Capone. This is a story about Fonz, because his full name was Alphonse Capone.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's why they call him Fonzo, the Fonz. They keep calling him that because that's like his family name. That's his private name. This is all about the private inner life of a man falling apart. And then it's just hilarious that they decided to change the name and just call it Capone. It feels so completely backwards to what the movie's trying to say, you know? But, you know, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it's like, okay, Josh Trank, you get a write and direct and even get final cut. You get sole editing credit on this movie. But we got to sell this movie, and no one knows what Fonzo is, you know? So maybe that was one of the creative liberties he had to give up.
I would have, if you had told me there's a movie called Fonzo, it's about someone called the Fonz, I would have said this is like the Joker of Arthur Fonzarelli from Happy Days. Like because at one point one of them says, "See you later, Fonzo," and I thought instantly, Happy Days. Like, and I didn't know, and we'll have to talk later about like real life and what this movie, like some of the facts it takes liberties with, but I didn't know that was a nickname that Al Capone had. And I will go ahead and side with the studio on this. I think that giving him the calling the movie Fonzo, like nobody knows what that is. Like calling it Capone, even people who don't know who Al Capone, like even people who don't know a lot about the American mafia and history of organized crime, and you may not know the difference between Matt Salinger and Al Capone, like you still know, oh, okay, American gangster. And so I think that was probably a wise choice.
Yeah, and like even though I've watched the movie, like they keep calling him Fonz, I was like a little confused. I'm like, why do they keep calling him that? And I had to look it up, you know, and so maybe that points to like it's like, and I understand the decision where like because there are certain levels of like ambiguity that I think you should maybe like as a writer, I understand the decision where, okay, we're going to have some choices here, and some of these choices we're just not even going to explain it. They are details about the world that will go unsaid, but there are other stuff that like maybe you should let the audience know what that is. And this feels like he's like kind of approaching this from you know for Al Capone scholars only. And it's like, well, I'm a little confused here because not a lot of people are Al Capone scholars. Yeah. And if you are an Al Capone scholar, maybe you'd feel a little annoyed. Like you maybe feel like the movie's patting itself on the back for calling him Fonz almost exclusively. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's a good segue, because if you are an Al Capone scholar, I would think you're kind of be a little annoyed that virtually nothing in this movie, like, and I'm not just talking about like what's real and what's not, like what's in his head and what's not. I'm talking about like stuff that this movie presents as factual information about Al Capone is apparently not true. Like we talked about when you and Ben talked about The Founder, I kind of talked about like in the movie, it presents it as Ray Kroc is married to Laura Dern, and then he marries Linda Cardellini. But in real life, there was a third wife in between those two, or a second wife in between those two. And like you guys both kind of made the point that like it's not a movie's job to just be a history book. It's a movie's job to tell a story, and that may sometimes mean playing loosey-goosey with the facts to kind of streamline it a little bit. Like that movie would have been half an hour longer, or you know, it would have been weird if somebody said, "Hey, how's that second wife of yours, Ray Kroc?" And he said, "Nah, she and I aren't together anymore. Now I'm with this woman that I was eyeing back when I was with my first wife." You know, it'd be weird if you did that. With this movie, apparently in real life, there is no evidence that Al Capone had a hidden son named Tony. And that's like a big part of this movie is that he keeps getting phone calls from his son, Tony, but it's not his son with Linda Cardellini. And at one point, Dr. Kyle MacLachlan has Al drawing pictures, and then he draws a picture of his son, Tony, and his actual son in the movie is like, who's this? Dad, I'm your son. And so his son is confused, like, I don't have a half brother, do I? And Linda Cardellini's like, no, you don't. But then later she's getting a phone call and saying, is this Tony? And that's like a driving force of the movie. But then when you look it up, I'm seeing dozens of websites that say there is nothing to suggest that he had a son named Tony. And that feels like that's something that like, oh, this would be a really neat idea. Like maybe, you know, his family doesn't know about it. So is this real or is this fake? Kind of like everything else in this movie, except that like at this point, it almost feels like you're not even making an Al Capone movie if you can't even get any Al Capone information correct. And like I mentioned, I'm going to have to look up the name of the mafia guy, but there was someone who is kind of a mentor figure to Al Capone, who is maybe is played by Matt Dillon in this movie. And he, in real life, had a heart attack and died. But in this movie, eventually you find out that the one guy, Gino, actually stabbed him like with a box cutter in the neck. And he has like this weird looking mask on when he gets stabbed. And like I looked that up and it's like, oh, did that guy get violently murdered by Al Capone's man? Oh, no, he didn't. It was just he had a fairly mundane and normal heart attack while he was waiting for a haircut. And so like it's one of those things, again, that's in that 11-minute stretch of movie where I'm certain that's the one you were talking about, where I have a feeling Josh Trank was watching The Shining and then he sat up and said, oh, get me Bellevue content on the phone right now. And so like I feel like if you showed this to an Al Capone scholar, they would say, what is this and who is this supposed to be about?
Wow, you did a really good takedown of that. Because this is one of those movies that is like boring in a way where I'm like, well, it's probably this boring because it's trying to be as faithful to real life as possible. And I guess not. So never mind.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up. Johnny Torrio is the guy that Matt Dillon is just credited as playing someone named Johnny. And Johnny, so the Internet Movie Database says he might be playing Johnny Torrio, who is Al Capone's mentor. And when you watch the movie, yeah, Matt Dillon is kind of sort of acting like he was a mentor figure to Al Capone, but they don't technically call him Johnny Torrio. So maybe that's him, maybe that's not. But then if it's not him, then who is it? But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think
another thing that this movie does that feels like amateur hour first year film school thing is, oh, Al Capone, he sees this kid running around and it's him when he was a child. Ooh, get out of here with that. Like that feels like Baby's first surrealism or Baby's first dream sequence where it's like, I'm at the end of my life and I'm, coming to terms with all the things in my life that I'm unfulfilled by or regret or haunted by. And then there's me when I was innocent and I long to be that kid again. I'm sure that's a real thing people have, but when it comes to telling a story and cinematically representing these feelings, it's just not interesting. And it's been done so many times. And there's a way of presenting that feels, I don't know, it feels kind of hacky, I guess is the best way I can put it.
Yes. So I wonder if this was just, I'm not even joking. I feel like Josh Trank had just finished watching The Shining and came up with this idea because it really does feel like, wow, what's his name? Jack Torrance goes to this hotel and then it's like, are there actual specters in the hotel that are haunting him, or is he just crazy and he's losing his mind trying to figure out this story that he's trying to write? Is it a combination of the two? And like, there's that part specifically in The Shining where he goes in and it's the ballroom and then the guy's like, Mr. Torrance, this is on the house. Your money's no good here, Mr. Torrance. And like in this, like Capone like goes in and everyone's like, hey, it's Capone. And then it's like, I found my thrill. And the whole time I was like, The Shining, like this is The Shining. Is no one else like, and I I've only seen The Shining once, and I was getting that. I can't imagine somebody who like really likes that movie. Like, if is it just me, or does this feel like it's really ripping that off?
Yeah, no, there absolutely is an influence of yeah, you're right. The Shining. It's like one guy stuck in a big house and hallucinations are happening, and there's a ballroom, and yeah, no, I balloons. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I see where you're coming from, and I don't know, like it's like I feel like though the thing is like The Shining I think is saying something with all that weird stuff,
Yeah.
and I don't know what it's saying beyond Al Capone is haunted by his past. Al Capone has some regrets in his life. Al Capone wishes he was an innocent child again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a whole lot to go off of that.
Yeah, it's definitely not enough to make a hour and 48-minute movie out of. And I think, I mean, I don't know if there's much of a career of making a 12-minute short film anymore. I know back in the golden age of Hollywood, that's something you could do. And nowadays, you either make big budget blockbusters, or you make like made for TV movies, and there's not really a middle ground. You can work in television, and nowadays, like, the lines between television and movie is getting blurred a little with like streaming media, but still, like, I don't know what Josh Trank could do, because you're right. I don't feel like there's much being said here. I do like some of the performances. This may actually be one of our shorter podcasts, just because I realize now we don't have a whole lot to say, and that's because this movie doesn't have a whole lot to say.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it. I guess maybe you were talking about, as far as like Josh Trank, like what would be a good avenue for him. Maybe music videos and commercials might be an avenue for him. And every so often he drops a short film on like YouTube or Vimeo or something.
Mm-hmm. And that's a shame, because I know I have kind of poo-pooed like whoever the two guys were who directed AVP Requiem, like their entire film history before that was like music videos and like video games, and like stuff that I kind of was like, huh, I stuck my nose up at that. It's like, you're not real filmmakers. And like, so I hate to say that, like, maybe he'd be better off doing that stuff, but
well, I mean, like
shorter.
Michael Bay and David Fincher got started doing commercials and music videos.
Yeah. If we're saying you should be more like Michael Bay, Josh Trank, that's...
Well, I say that because Michael Bay and David Fincher started at the same company.
Okay, and they're both, whether you like Michael Bay or not, they're both successful at what they do, financially successful anyway.
And I mean, David Fincher is a lot of people's favorite director. You know, like the dude made Fight Club, the dude made The Social Network. He also Seven, yeah. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Zodiac. Like the dude's like, he's made a lot of long movies, but he also got started doing music videos and commercials. And like I think Matt Reeves did as well. Like, and you're right, television, maybe like coming in to do like an episode of television might, serve it well, like serve him well. Like a lot of these, really good directors did that. I don't particularly like J.J. Abrams, but he got started in television. It was extremely successful for him. A lot of people knew who he was, like knew his name. Like my dad knew his name when Mission Impossible 3 was coming out, and that was his first movie, because my dad knew what Lost was. My dad was a big Lost fan. You know what I mean? Like, and Alias was a huge show and stuff like that, where like
Felicity.
Right. Yeah. And so like there are these different avenues for shorter form. I think maybe it's because I don't know if Josh Trank even went to film school. I think he just was like a guy who made, short films on YouTube and got plucked out of obscurity to do Chronicle, and then immediately got into like the major studio grind. Maybe he just needs to, go and find a shorter form video production, because there's a lot of avenues for him.
If he didn't go to film school, then I will say bravo. I haven't liked any of the movies he's done, but I'm impressed if he was able to kind of pull himself up by his bootstraps without any formal training. If he's able to do this stuff, imagine what he could have done if he had gone to film school. Like, I would say maybe someday he will make a good movie. And I hate that that what happened to him and what happened around Fan Forstic did happen, but like it's probably he learned a valuable lesson. He's probably never going to, if DC says we're going to do a Doom Patrol movie and we want Josh Trank, he'll probably either A, has learned his lesson, or B, he'll think there's no way this will happen to me a second time, and then it happens to him a second time. Who knows? Yeah, I think that I didn't know that. I assumed that he had gone to film school, but that I will say, even though I still don't think differently about these movies, I am impressed that he's been able to do this without, just do it without any actual like know-how, I guess is what I'm saying. That sounds mean, but
well, let me look it up because I don't know for sure.
Okay. While you look it up, I want to. So I was saying I wasn't sure if this movie was trying to be funny or if it was trying to be tragic. Because you look at like if you've had someone who like went through dementia and was slowly dying and they didn't know who you were, that's very sad, and it can be a traumatic experience for the family. But then, like you said, this movie also like has Linda Cardellini pull back the bedsheet, and instead of a dead horse's head being there, Al Capone has just messed his pants. And so it's like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to show, oh, this is how tragic it is that this man who was once so brilliant is now fallen so far? Or are they trying to make it be a dark comedy? And like I said, I didn't know. And before we started talking, I would have said, if you take away Tom Hardy's performance, that everything else about this movie is pretty serious. But then also I'm thinking of what might be my favorite scene in the movie is where Kyle MacLachlan is like the family doctor, and at one point he goes to the other side of the lake and he meets these feds who have been listening in on the conversations in the house, or have they? And then he says like, well, he had a stroke, and the feds are basically like, you need to get the information out of him or else, doctor. And so then he goes in and he says like, okay, as a doctor, I think that Al Capone should draw some pictures. Here's a platypus. Here's a boy holding a balloon. And then he like holds up these two photographs and he says, okay, Al, I'm going to let you choose what to do next. It's a platypus or it's a bag of money. And then Al Capone like points at the platypus. He says, no, we already drew the platypus. I want you to draw a bag of money for me, Al. And like, I feel like the movie is wanting to say like, oh, this is Kyle MacLachlan's way of trying to find out where the money is buried. But then he draws like a cartoonish looking sack of money. And I'm thinking like, okay, that still doesn't tell the feds or Kyle MacLachlan where the money is buried. So I don't know, like that to me, like that whole scene, I thought was just hilarious. And Kyle MacLachlan's doing the best he can. I did kind of feel for him where he's caught between his duty as a doctor and something is going to happen to him from the feds if he doesn't find out where the money is. So Kyle MacLachlan's doing the best he can. Linda Cardellini's doing the best he can. I thought that scene was hilarious though.
Yeah. So first of all, Josh Trank, apparently he his highest level of education was high school. Oh, and okay. His father, though, was documentary filmmaker Richard Trank, who apparently won an Academy Award. So that's cool. So when it comes to what you were talking about, like that's where it becomes a little irritating for me, is where like I think the choice is you're seeing all of these feds. So this is okay. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. It becomes a little frustrating because obviously I kind of like movies where it's like you're not exactly sure what's going on. There's like, it feels like there's ambiguity going on, but usually those movies don't cheat with POV. With this movie, opening text says this is the context. There are FBI agents watching what's his face, Al Capone, and so then you see it'll cut away to feds in a bus or in some kind of van listening in on phone calls, and I guess what they're looking for is the $10 million, and it's like somewhere in like the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2, you find out that Al Capone buried $10 million somewhere and he can't remember where it is. And every so often, it comes back up, and his visions are telling him to start digging where it's wet. And so it's like, well, I live on my property, and there is, a large body of water. and there's some alligators in there, and maybe it's there, and he's like trying to dig, and maybe he's hallucinating that there are these FBI agents digging around, and he's convinced and he's paranoid that that there are FBI agents watching him and asking him to do things. And so it's like, okay, are they actually there or not? Because the opening text said they are there. Is that just trying to like cheat and get me into the headspace of Al Capone where I'm supposed to be paranoid like him? If you want me to do that organically and naturally. Like, pick up the phone and don't show me the other end of the phone. Right? Have him listening to things and don't show me the other side of the phone, because if it's like an auditory hallucination, then we're not breaking POV. We're still with Al Capone when he's listening to that stuff. When you cut to his son sitting in a hotel room or whatever, and FBI agents are hanging out with him, that I think shows too much, and it's the way the kind of dry nature of the movie, it implies a level of objectivity that I think it does kind of cheat. And maybe you could argue it's not cheating, but it feels really sneaky and like it's trying to convince you of something that's not real. Man, I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit. So when you get to the doctor, Kyle MacLachlan talking to the feds, I'm just confused what the feds are doing. Are they like trying to make sure he doesn't leave? Are they trying to like keep tabs on? Like, why are they keeping tabs on him? Do they just want the $10 million? Is that really all they're after? This seems like a whole lot of effort to just get $10 million. But, maybe it does make sense if you're like a not well person who's losing their memory and having dementia, and like you're a paranoid and you're like, thinking everyone's out to get you. I guess maybe that makes sense. But this is where it becomes frustrating because I'm not sure what the intentions of the film really are.
Yeah. And, watching the movie, I don't think we're meant to question it too much. But then after the movie, like as you were describing that, I was thinking to myself, why do the feds want $10 million? And I thought this movie is set like around 1947, I think, because it said he was spent 10 years. I think it said in 37 he was put in prison, and then he spent 10 years in prison, and then they released him. So this may be a few years later. So this may be even early 50s. I don't know. But 1950, $10 million, like that would be a whole lot of money for like a schmo on the street. But for the American government, I feel like $10 million would pay like, a few people's salaries. Like now that you're explaining like how weird it is, I'm like, yeah, why do the American government, why do they want $10 million? Like it'd be one thing if this was like a rival gangster was like looking for the 10 million bucks or something like that. But like, you're right. It doesn't make a lot of sense why these guys are looking for it. And like Al Capone is clearly not going to be able to use it. Like he doesn't even know, like if you handed him $1,000 bill, he wouldn't know whether to use it to buy I don't know, a car or use it to wipe his nose. Like he's in a place right now where the money would be useless to him. And so like you're right. Like it seems like it's just there to kind of provide this air quotes conflict, but there's really not much conflict there. It's really just, is this all in his head or not? And I guess when I said I liked that earlier, I guess what I really meant was I like the idea of it. Because like I said, I thought this was going to be a mobster movie, and it's not that. And I think a psychological, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a thriller necessarily, but like an internal psychological movie could be an interesting idea if you told me you're going to go with a mobster. But I don't think that Josh Trank is necessarily the right person to handle a psychological something.
Yes, I would agree with that. Maybe he was in the middle of writing it, and maybe somebody suggested to him, or he thought, well, I don't know, maybe having some kind of plot should probably be helpful. I realize how that sounded. That sounds like me saying, well, every movie's got to have a plot. No, like it has to, like, it feels like my issue is like the stuff with the $10 million feels tacked on. It feels like I got this thread and stuff I kind of want to do, where I want to examine Al Capone losing his marbles and confronting and being haunted and his past. Whoa. But there needs to be something happening right now to justify, to hang all these other stuff I want to do on. I don't know. He wants to get some money. And it's like, that's it. And it's like, that feels a little weak to me, I would say.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say. When I was in high school, I used to watch this cartoon on a Disney Channel called American Dragon Jake Long. It was about this high school kid who can turn into a dragon, and he basically fights various supernatural threats around New York City. And he had a talking dog for a sidekick. And at one point, the dog was like in debt to a couple of ogres. And he said, like, the ogres may come. I promise there's a point to all this. He said, the ogres may come by and they may say, "Where's the money?" And watching this movie, at one point, one of the feds says to Capone, "Where's the money?" And I laughed a lot. I think I've come around on this. I think I had tricked myself into thinking this movie was more interesting than what it was. I think you're right. It probably could have been handled better with like the is it all in his head or not? And I'm not afraid to say it. I am a hypocrite. Like there have been movies that have probably handled this better that I disliked for doing the is it all in their head or not trope. But I guess because I went into this expecting a pretty straightforward mobster movie and didn't get that, I was suitably surprised at what we did get instead. But I think that it should have been done by someone else. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it?
I guess we still have how long have we been going on for talking about this?
I don't know. Probably maybe an hour.
Okay. Well, I'll just say the ending. I think the ending is where it, like, kind of perfectly like surmises all of the weird tonal issues I have with this movie, where I'm just confused more than anything. It's Al Capone with a gun and a bathrobe just kind of stomping around, and it's like he's got a carrot in his mouth, and like you describe it and like it sounds kind of funny, but like is it supposed to be funny? Is it am I supposed to be pointing and laughing at this, but now I feel weird because I'm laughing at like a mentally handicapped person. Like I know he's a horrible gangster who's done terrible things, and he's acting violently, but like it just feels weird to like laugh at someone who's like that. And I don't know. Like, is this like justice? But like at the same time, it feels like I'm supposed to be scared of him, and I'm supposed to like be like scared for the people he's shooting at. But like I also don't understand what the consequence of this action is, because nobody ends up finding any money.
Right, and he doesn't go to prison for shooting all these people. We see the workers spackling up the holes in the wall that he shot, and then he still gets to live on his palace, and his family still comes and eats Thanksgiving with him. They all still love him. There's no consequence other than he goes further into madness. He's worse off at the second Thanksgiving we see than he was at the first Thanksgiving that we see.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and it's like, well, mentally handicapped man in a bathrobe and a carrot in his mouth stomping around his house with a machine gun. It's pretty big. That sounds like something you do for a climax of a movie.
What appears to be a gold-plated machine gun. It doesn't look like just any old machine gun. I'm thinking like melt that thing down and you've got at least a hospital right there.
Nice. I guess there's one thing I want to say is that there's a movie. So I watched this with my buddy and our colleague Rasco, and a year ago. So like the first time I watched this, and there's a movie he said it reminded him of, and sometime in the last year he actually showed me this movie. It's a movie directed by Gus Van Sant called Last Days. I don't know if you're familiar with this movie, but it's not in all but name. It's about the last days of Kurt Cobain, where it's about a rock star in the 1990s who's depressed and lives in Seattle. And he has long, dirty blonde hair, and he mumbles, and he's addicted to drugs. It's Kurt Cobain, right? And so that's a movie where I can see similarities between these two. But I think something like Last Days is better because I feel like it's trying to say something about why this person is depressed. Here's how depression actually looks in somebody's last days. It's not, before they take their life. It's not big and melodramatic. It's the crushing repetition of nothingness. And I think it's able to kind of keep that. It's able to stay true to that idea, but it's also able to like make that watchable and interesting, where it's like, because he's not the only character in the movie, but there are these other characters that, and you see like this, it's like the movie sort of tricks you out where you start to see the same 2 or 3 days played over again from a slightly different perspective. And I like the ambiguity there, which is, am I watching the same day told from different perspectives, or am I watching like a new day where the exact same things are happening? And I think no matter what the perspective, whatever's actually happening, it communicates the idea of this repetitive emptiness of this lifestyle is what is making not Kurt Cobain depressed. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, I got it. And like, what is the true in that ambiguity? I ultimately don't really care what's true. But what I do care about is I understand how this is affecting the Blake character. Mm-hmm. Now, Last Days is not a movie I would recommend to hardly anybody. I liked it quite a bit, but it's really slow and really sad and really kind of boring, but I liked it. This, though, I don't understand. It doesn't have that same kind of insight. And like you had said, like when you get to the end, like there's no consequence for anything that happens. It's like you watch a collection of scenes and then it's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a shame, because I think on paper, like once I found out, oh, this isn't going to be a typical like, hey, Toots, you're coming with me to see the big boss. It's not a typical mobster type story. I was like, oh, okay, I'm interested now. And then it's handled about as clumsily as that one character in Lost handling dynamite that came off the pirate ship. So like, I don't know. Like, I do think the scene "Dig Where It's Wet." I took a different take from that. It's a woman who is straddling Capone, and she's taking off her underwear, and she's smiling coyly and says, "Dig where it's wet." I don't know. I don't know if she was talking about the $10 million, if you know what I'm saying.
There's a different kind of treasure she's talking about.
Yeah. And then she got shot in the face by feds. Anyway, or did she? And then there was a man performing an action on a teddy bear, or was he? I think we've said about all that we could say about this movie. I am sorry for picking it. It wasn't as entertaining as Gotti. This wasn't even as entertaining as some of the movies that I've really hated, like Titanic, or like when we talked about Sex and the City. Like, it wasn't even as entertaining as those, us talking about it. It was just kind of a that was really what I think we both came away from this. So I think, like I said, I still prefer this to Fan Four Stick and Chronicle, I think, but I wouldn't say it's a good movie.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm glad I was able to finally talk about it at length. When I watched it for the first time, I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to talk about this someday on the podcast, boys. And I was like, well, I'm not going to pick it. And then inevitably you did. I thought it would be a couple years, but you know what? It's okay.
Yeah. So that means it's now your turn to torture me with something. What are you going to choose?
Well, I have many potential picks in front of me right now that would make really, really good discussions. But I have so many options here. The freedom is almost just crippling. So please pick a number between 1 and 10.
3.
All right, number 3. Ooh, okay. You know what? This is good because coming up pretty soon at the end of this month. Well, okay, this movie will be newly released by the time this podcast goes up. There is the new Edgar Wright film, Last Night in Soho, which I'm looking forward to, which would make it a really good time to talk about Edgar Wright's previous movie, Baby Driver.
Oh, let me think. Hold on. It has the chick who looks a whole lot like Matchkin and Mick, but that's not our Twin Peaks connection. Oh no, it's not John Hamm. It's not Jamie Foxx. It's not Kevin Spacey. I don't know.
I'm not going to guess it.
Who is it?
Baby's mom is played by an actress named Sky Ferreira, and she was in one scene from Twin Peaks: The Return. If you recall, she is one of the people in the Roadhouse, and that probably just made you go, "Oh, okay, whatever." But
she's one of those scenes that right before the credits.
Yes, so she's at the Roadhouse, and she has like a horrible rash that she's always itching, and she's like a drug addict or something. Anyways, That's the character. She's technically in both of these things, and she plays the mother of the titular Baby Driver. Have you seen Baby Driver before?
I have not.
Well, you know what?
Is this the right woman? I looked her up. She's 29 years old. She plays Baby's mom. Is it in flashbacks?
Well, you'll just have to see.
Oh, okay.
This is going to be, I think, not show my hand, quite a difference between the last few movies we've talked about, movies and shows that we've talked about, because I do thoroughly enjoy this movie. Not to hype it up too much, but this is Edgar Wright's 2017 action comedy pseudo musical Baby Driver.
And this is also, I believe, the second Edgar Wright movie you and I have talked about, because we did talk about Scott Pilgrim.
That is correct. I forgot about that.
I'm looking forward to this because I remember seeing trailers for it, and I don't remember when it came out, but I remember thinking that looks interesting. And then it was just one of those things where a lot of times I will see a trailer and I will either say I don't care, or I will say that looks interesting. And this was one I said that looks interesting, but then I never did see it. And so,
you know what? It's available on a video hosting website where if somebody has a digital library and
okay,
if they were to share a password or something, I don't know, something wacky like that might happen.
Dig where it's wet.
Basically, yes, sir. Yeah.
By the way, I think the $10 million is in the statue that gets hauled off at the end. Okay, I said it.
I think it's in Al Capone's vault. Oh wait.
So, Baby Driver, I'm looking forward to it. I don't really have any. I remember when it came out. I remember you saying that you really liked it. So I'm glad that we're gonna get something that's not a miserable experience for either one of us. I think I will probably like it too. I think I know Edgar Wright almost did Ant-Man and then he didn't, and everyone was mad and upset. I think this is one of those directors. I think he's better off just doing his own thing where he can have complete control. I know we should probably be wrapping this up now, but this may be something we can talk about more next week. But since we just talked about Josh Trank, who is a director who would like to have complete control, I feel like Edgar Wright is the kind of guy who works better when he has complete control. And I just don't know what the world would have been like if he had stayed in the Marvel system where he's being told what to do.
Right. That is one of the greatest shames in the history of the Marvel Universe to me, is those Ant-Man movies are so uncreatively directed. Mm-hmm. And to think that they were this way after they were almost directed by Edgar Wright, who I will show my hand that I think is one of the most energetic and creative filmmakers working today right now, is just a crying shame.
Yeah. And I like the movie that I saw from him. So I will probably, to show my hand, I will probably enjoy this movie, Baby Driver. So that is what we will be talking about in a couple weeks. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm Keanu Nielsen.
Well, we'll see you next time. All right, yeah.